Yes, speaker at this time, Mr. Shin, also known as SK, his initial Soonkyu, will be giving his testimony at this time to share about Yana ministry, which stands for You Are Not Alone. And he became blind at the age of 9. His parents sent him to the U.S. at the age of 15 to stay with the foster family to study. After graduating from Harvard University for undergrad and MIT for a PhD, he became the first blind person to pass the CFA exam. He has been working as an analyst for JP Morgan and Brown Brothers Harriman for the past 25 years. He's the founder and the chairman of a Christian mission organization. You could look up and find out more at yanaministry.org. And this ministry is committed to serving the abandoned and impoverished orphans in Korea. And at this time, I want to welcome him, and his wife, Grace, will guide him to come forward, or David, or, yeah.
Okay. Good morning. Well, so good to be here. About 4 years ago, we moved to Bergen County from Summit, New Jersey. At that time, we were attending a church about an hour away from here. So, having driven over to church and back every Sunday for about a year, we decided to look for a church around here somewhere to, settle in. We were looking for a place where God will send us. And so we were looking at a number of different churches. For a while there, we were visiting a new church every week. And I don't know why, this church name never came up. We looked at the location yesterday for GPS, and it said, depending on the app, 7 minutes or 9 minutes. So I was thinking, my goodness, how did we miss this? So good to be here finally. Good to be here with you. So people wonder when they either meet me for the first time or hear about me somewhere, they wonder about a number of things. First of all, they wonder how a blind person, let alone one who was not born in this country, could have gone to places like Harvard or MIT. They wonder about that. They also wonder how a person who cannot see at all, I cannot even see light, so, a room can be totally without light, and I wouldn't know the difference. My son, when he was a baby, he used to just pretend that lights were off. And, is the light off? He'll say, yeah. But, I'll find out later it's really not. So there were times like that. For somebody who cannot see like that, how could he even go to Wall Street to work? That's something they also wonder about. Another thing they wonder about is, we live in Fair Lawn. So for me to go to my job every day, every working day, I have to take 2 New Jersey transit trains and the New York City subway to get there. And people wonder, how in the world does he do that? So people have come up with different ideas, One, somebody would say, well, he must be brilliant, He must be so incredibly smart that he can do these things. Other people say, he must be extraordinarily hardworking, day and night, maybe he doesn't sleep that much. Well, neither is true, as my family or my coworkers will testify. The simple answer to these questions, of course, we all know what that is. It's God's goodness. And that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. God has been extraordinarily good to me. You know, I was born in a family that did not believe in God. I grew up, most of my early years was all about trying to get my eye troubles solved. I think my mother told me, 22 surgeries, and that's when they stopped counting. It was just so many. And I spent so much time in the hospital when I was a little boy. There were surgeries that required 6 weeks of recovery period, during which I could not move at all. They would actually have me lie down on a bed with my head totally immobile for 6 weeks. You know, you're talking about a 6, 7, 8-year-old boy. If any of you has had one of those, trying to keep him immobile for, say, 6 minutes, it's hard to do. 6 weeks was very tough to do. But despite that, I lost my sight, as Pastor Joe mentioned earlier, totally when I was 9. People would think, that's horrible. That's just, how does a person overcome that kind of a trauma, that kind of handicap? But again, the answer is God's goodness. And because I went blind, when I went blind, I should say, I met Jesus early in life. I went to a school for the blind in Seoul since I was 9. I attended that school for 6.5 years. And there, every Monday night, a bunch of volunteers would come, and they would hold a worship service for Christians. And that's where I actually went, honestly, because the alternative was that we had the study time in the evening. It was 7 to 8:30. So it was either being locked up in your room studying, or you could go to this service. So I chose freedom, not knowing that I was really choosing real freedom. Amen. So God has been with me ever since. Truth to be told, he was with me even before then. We all know that. But I met him through that experience, and I've been appreciating how good God is ever since then. So the opportunities of a lifetime comes, I think, when we least expect it. In the summer of 1980, I attended a mission-sponsored camp, summer camp for blind children, and there I met a missionary originally from Scotland. His name is Barry Flitcroft, and he represented United World Mission based out of Florida, and his main mission at the time was serving the blind children of Korea. And, you know, weather really plays a big role sometimes. Unfortunately for all the campers, it rained a lot. And so we couldn't do a whole lot outside. So what that meant was we were inside a lot, and we had a lot of free time too. So not knowing what else to do, we would actually play things. And one of the things we played was, what can you do? Show me what can you do. These were all students from different schools, and so we didn't know each other that much. So I decided to show off. You know, kids show off a lot. So I had learned to play the piano. See, my mother's idea about educating and training a blind child was to force him to take piano lessons. I had no music talent, you know, but it didn't matter. She thought I could become at least a music teacher at some point. So that was her idea. And so I played the piano for my camper friends, and when the missionary who was he was the director of the mission that sponsored the camp, he saw me play the piano, and he came over, asked me who I was, where I went to school, and that was that. One of the friends standing around said, you know, that guy is important. Maybe something good will happen to you. Well, even he didn't know what that would actually mean for me in the long run. The missionary he decided to take a bunch of boys from the Seoul National School for the Blind where I was attending, and he decided that I should become the piano player for the group. This was a quartet organized. So there were 4 singers, and I was the accompanist and a piano player. And in January 1981, I came to the United States for the first time. It's not like a new singing group sensation that my daughter loves whenever we have a new Korean group come to the U.S. and she has to go see them. But it was not like that. But even then, we went from Los Angeles all the way to Boston. For 2 months, we visited churches, and it was a fundraising tour for the mission that he was running at the time. He had American sponsors provide funds for blind students in Korea, and that's what we were doing, talking to existing sponsors and telling them all about us to raise funds for new children. Well, one thing really does lead to another. And after that trip, one of the places we visited, Overbrook School for the Blind, it's a school for the blind in Philadelphia, where we did a concert. That was just a concert. And the director of that school saw the 5 of us and decided that for no other reason than I was the youngest, he said, we'd like to have one of these boys come and study here at our school. And because of that, I got to come to the U.S. at the age of 15 and began to study in the U.S. This is actually a remarkable thing. Today, students come from Korea to study here all the time. They get host families or they go to a school with a dormitory, and that happens quite often. Back then, we're talking about early 1980s, that was very rare, let alone a blind student coming by himself to the U.S. and studying here. So that was a rare opportunity, and if God wasn't with me, God did not plan for that, that would have never happened. And I'm very thankful for that, because that was basically the beginning of everything. There's so much to talk about. We sang earlier about 10,000 reasons that God's grace is evident in our lives. We don't have that much time. I was told 30 minutes. My children would prefer to speak really, really short, like 140 characters or less. But so we don't have that much time. And if you're really curious, I published a book, an essay collection 2 years ago. And unfortunately, it's all in Korean, so there's no English version at this time. But we're working on it. I've been telling this to my friends ever since. We're working on an English version. But in the meantime, maybe you can read my book to see how God has really worked in my life all throughout. Needless to say, I went from that school for the blind. I attended a public school here in New Jersey for 4 years, public high school, and a remarkable story about how that led to my undergraduate career at Harvard College and graduate school studies at MIT Sloan School. Well, that was, extraordinary enough, at least in my mind. But what was more extraordinary was waiting on Wall Street. This is a place I never even dreamed of going. I was more an academic person, and so I thought that my career would be in a school somewhere. But God led me to Wall Street in 1994, and I've been there ever since. Now, all these goodness that one person can receive. The Bible talks about blessings, so much blessings that it's like somebody pressing something down on your lap to the overflowing. That's the way I felt about my life. Not only did I have the education that I never dreamed about, not only did I have a career I never dreamed about, but I also got to meet Grace, my wife, and we've been married for the last 21 years, coming up on 22, and we've been blessed with 2 children. You know, this is a life beyond my wildest imagining. When I was a little boy in Korea, a blind person's prospects were very, very limited. Even today, a blind person, what she can do for work is very limited. And, you know, my mother really had the right idea. The best thing she thought she could hope for was to make me a school teacher. But this is where I am. I have been. So when I turned 40, this was about 10 years ago. You can figure out how old I am now. When I turned 40, you know, the American culture has this thing about the big 4-0, right? And I'm an early riser. I start a day usually around 4 o'clock in the morning. It's not because I'm a hard worker, like I said before. It's just the way I am. By 9 o'clock p.m., I'm useless because I'm so sleepy. But that day I still remember. The day I turned 40, I woke up early like usual, and I decided to sit down and think about what God has done in my life all these years. Looking back, for whom I should be thankful, for what I should be incredibly grateful. So I had this long conversation with the Lord that day in my home office with the door locked. And a thought came to me. You know, God has been so incredibly gracious. And what have I done in response? And I really had nothing to show for it, nothing to say anything about that. And that's when I began to think, you know, being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus is all about receiving from the Lord and passing what we have received on to others. And that was the thought that I had that day. And it was an incredible thought because, you know, I think, to tell the truth, I had got so used to just getting things or receiving things from people. You know, like when you would go to a coffee shop, for example, my friends, my wife, my friends, my coworkers, they would actually prepare the coffee the way I liked it. And most times they pay for it too. And I had become so used to receiving, but not thinking about giving. I think that has a lot to do with my disability too. But you know, it's not there. A lot of things you can find to blame when explaining your less than Christian attitude or behavior. But I decided that disability shouldn't be one of them. To those who has been given so much, a lot is expected, a lot is required. We just heard that message in this sanctuary. And that's what I was thinking about that day when I turned 40. So I decided that I need to look for an opportunity to serve, to give. To be frank about it, I didn't do a heck of a lot about it that day or that month. As a matter of fact, 2007, if you remember anything about 2007, that was when the financial crisis was beginning to rage, and work was, overwhelming. So, okay, that's another excuse. You're right. That's another excuse. But it took me 3 years to figure out what exactly to do about this. So I knew that the church that where we were attending at the time, this was a Praise Church in Somerset, New Jersey, one of the projects we had was a summer mission trip that we were taking. We had taken since 2008. Pastor Chu Wang, he was our education pastor at the time. He had passion for children. This man had passion for children's ministry so much so that he became a high school teacher for 3 years to understand what children truly are like. And then he went to mission seminary. He had developed a passion for abandoned children in Korea. Now, it's interesting because when you talk about abandoned children, you think about orphans. And places where these children live used to be called orphanages. Unfortunately, I think it's a really unfortunate thing. Children who live in these facilities today are not, in fact, orphans. 70 to 80% of those children, in fact, have at least one living parent. The problem that awaits these children is the fact that Korea is still a very discriminating society. So they care a lot about your family background, who your parents are. You know, they're trying to do away with this. But even today, do you know that when you apply to a company for a job, you have to specify what your parents did for work? Now, in a situation like that, these children are relatively well cared for during their residency in these homes. But when they leave the home, they have to leave these homes when they graduate from high school. They basically stand alone to face a hostile world. And we knew this. And this is Pastor Ju's passion. He wanted to help these children. So they had been going to Dongmyeong Children's Home in Korea since 2008 every year, and they had been making progress in becoming friends with these children. So in 2010, my wife and I had been praying about what we may do to help others, and we both agreed that's where we should start. So we reached out to Pastor Ju one morning. This was in January too. You know, every January I have this birthday, and I have a conscience search, soul-searching opportunity, and that was January 2010. I reached out to Pastor Ju and said, listen, we want to do something for these children. What can we do? So he says, well, you know, we've been going to Dongmyeong for the last 2 years, 2008, 2009, and they're going to go back. They're planning a trip back that summer. One thing he always wanted to do was to bring some of the children, and some of the social workers, the teachers, to the U.S. He wanted to let them see a much bigger world. He wanted to let them see that there are really good people, genuine, kind people in the world. He wanted them to see families who are, in fact, happy and get along with each other. All the things that they had not known before. So I said, okay, so you want to bring some of them over? So what do you need for that? He said, money, of course. And he and I basically figured out a way to make that a reality. So since 2011, we have been inviting some of these children to the U.S. each year. We call it Flying Happiness. You know, a lot of people, when they hear Flying Happiness trips, they think it's all about these kids who come to the U.S., flying on an airplane, and you know, they really get a good 2-week stay in the U.S. We basically give them the trip of a vacation or a trip of their lives. And they think it's because of that we call it Flying Happiness. These kids come on Flying Happiness trips. No, the reason why we call it Flying Happiness is because they the children, they, the teachers who devote their lives to the welfare of these children, they are our happiness, and that they are also God's happiness. And as far as we're concerned, that the happiness from Korea comes to us on an airplane. So that's why we call it flying happiness. We've been doing this since 2011, and since last year, we do this twice a year. The reason why we do this, this was what Pastor Joe wanted to do to begin with. But I know that God has all these plans set. And I know why he started our ministry with that. Because we want to make connections with these children. These children were abandoned by their parents. They live in these institutions. Even if the conditions have improved meaningfully, these are institutional settings where they live. And they bring a good deal of baggage, emotional baggage, and it's very difficult to become genuine friends with these children. And what we began to do, after all, going to them during the summer in a short-term mission trips, and them coming to us on a Flying Happiness trips, we get to know them. We get to spend time with them. We make connections. Facebook is great. We keep contact with these children. And what we are hoping for is that God would replicate his story with me in the lives of these children. So that was what we were hoping for. In 2012, Pastor Ju and I and some other like-minded friends began a not-for-profit organization called Yana Ministry. We decided that this is too big a thing for one church to do. There were some 20,000 children living in these homes in Korea today. And we decided that this is a mission that requires a lot more people. And so we decided and started that organization. That organization is going pretty strong, even today. We have done a number of different things that I want to talk to you about briefly. So one of the things that I really dreamed about was to invite some of these children to come to the U.S., live with host families, and go to school here. And, maybe God will be so good to them as he was good to me to lead them to additional opportunities, colleges, careers, spouses, all these. So we decided that that's where we should take this ministry. And in 2014, our first student came to the U.S., and she has been in the U.S. for 3.5 years. She's a sophomore in high school today. And if you met her brand new, talk to her, you would never know she was not born here. She speaks perfect English, toned to New Jersey. And she has the same issues that any other American teenager has. She thinks, for instance, her dad is kind of boring, and she wants her dad to pick up a sense of humor. So it's very typical American kid. And since then, we have brought over 3 others. And if God willing, come January, we'll have 2 more. So that's one thing we do. The other is, there are so many kids living in these children's homes, and they are, anywhere from age, several days to 18, as you can imagine. So what we are doing is to, just the way Barry Flitcroft used to do with the blind students in South Korea, we match a sponsor family in the U.S. with a particular child. And that family, we call that program Yana Family. The program I talked about earlier is called YSAP, that's Yana Study Abroad Program. This program I'm about to talk about is called Yana Family. And what they do is a family picks a child, and for that child, they put away $30 a month. We're basically building a scholarship fund when they grow up. Not only that, we want that family to take interest in the child, how she is doing. They basically go back and forth. And sometimes when that family goes to Korea for a visit, they go visit the child. And so we want to, again, make connections between the children and the families here in the U.S. And so maybe when that child grows up, through YSAP or other opportunities, maybe that family can become a host family as well. So we are, again, trying to make connections for the children with stable, happy Christian homes in the U.S. and provide them with opportunities like the ones I received. So those are two main things that I can talk to you about. The others we do. And just to get the word out for more people to understand what Yana does. And more than what Yana does, what Yana stands for. To be brief about it, Yana stands to be a best substitute for family that we can be for these children. Because for other things, people who are really good students, for instance, they can get opportunities to go abroad. They can get opportunities to go study in good schools, even if you're from one of these homes. What we want to be is the unconditionally loving family for these children. So that's where Yana's heart is. For a lot more people to understand that and to ask questions and to, in fact, experience what Yana is all about, we began what we call a Vision House project. This is a space that we have at True Light Church in Teaneck. As a matter of fact, this is a kind of opportune thing because the opening is this Saturday. So if any of you is interested in finding out more about Yana, you can come along to True Light Church this Saturday at 1 o'clock. This is like open house kind of a thing. Between 1 and 3, there'll be people there. There'll be information. There'll be people who can tell you all about Yana. And this is a place for conversations, understanding, the hearts to come together, all that. And we're starting that this Saturday. This is the first time we're doing this. So all of you are welcome to come and hear more about Yana. People say life is unfair, and I agree. Our faith is based on something extraordinarily unfair. Because grace, if you think about it, is an unfair thing. Grace means that it costs the giver a lot. It costs the receiver nothing. And that's how we got saved. Jesus, his suffering on the cross was all about a sinless person, sinless God of the world, of the universe, to be sacrificed, to suffer, to bleed, to be separated from his Father, God the Father, for the benefit of sinful people like us. That's the message of grace. And that's what we believe in. And I believe that it is against our nature to render grace. But with God's example, we can just try to imitate, replicate that grace. And, I don't insist that helping the orphaned or abandoned children in Korea is the only way. But that's the way God showed me, my family, and my friends to render grace in this graceless world. So I invite you to consider this. You know, God sends people to us, to our lives. You know, you run into some people, it seems like coincidentally, but there are times when God is sending you people to care for, sending you people to love, sending you people for whom you can make sacrifices of your time, your resources, your hearts. And I hope that this message today will be a point where, compared to this, not much else will be the most important thing in your lives. Because that's the way it has been with me and my wife. Things have been never the same. And, you know, if you really want to know what it's like to be a host family, to raise a child that you've never met before, you can talk to my wife, Grace. She has done a great job, and she has a lot to talk about. And she'll be there next Saturday. So, as I mentioned to Pastor Joe before, I think my allotted time is coming to a close in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. I welcome questions in these testimonial sessions because, you know, God does move hearts in times like this. And I invite you to raise your hand and ask a question. No question is out of bounds, and I will be glad to answer any questions you may have. Pastor Joe, would you like to let me know if anybody's raising their hands?
Feel free. Question?
Don't be shy.
Do you have help getting on trains?
Nobody consistently, no. But you know, the thing is, if you go on the same commute path every day for a long time, yeah, there are people who know you. There are people who would offer to help. But you know, that's never consistent. So all I can do really is to rely on myself, my sense of hearing, my sense of smell. Actually, that helps a lot too, because Penn Station has various different eateries, and depending on what I'm smelling, I know where I am. So, any other questions? Oh, good question. Yeah, good question. Pastor Joe mentioned foster family. So I grew up in Korea. My biological family consists of parents and 2 brothers. They're all there. They're still in Korea, and you know, I keep in touch with them. You know, I call my mother every week, for example, and the family that raised me since I was 15, they were, in fact, legally nothing at all. There were no legal papers. They didn't adopt me. There was no authority where they register as a foster family or foster child. But nevertheless, by God's grace, they became my family, and they still are. In that family, there are 2 brothers, 2 sisters. They're all over the place. Dad still lives here in New Jersey, the place where I went to high school. Mom passed away about 12 years ago now. And so, yes, I still have those families, and I am pretty close to them still. And I got a family here in Fairlawn. Oh, yeah, I forgot about them. Fairlawn, I got my wife and children here. David is my son, our son. He's 12 years old. And Yejin is 16. She's in 10th grade. And just in case you're wondering, I wasn't really talking about her earlier. All right. I'm not supposed to lie in the church. Okay. Any other question?
You ever wonder about the other 4 kids that came out that toured with you and you never found out?
I'm sorry. The other two. Oh, good question. You know, it's very difficult to keep in touch. I know one of them lives in Southern California. I reached out to him years ago. I mean, this was 36 years ago, right? And yeah, the only one I know for sure, oh, actually, I know one of them, the tenor, this is, quartet, right? The tenor, he died years ago. I know that. And the other one who lives in Southern California, I think he's still there. The last time I verified that he's still there is like several years ago, so I don't know what happened to them. How did I meet what? Yeah, how did I meet my wife? So, very quickly. This could get long. So when I came to New York, this was after my schooling was done in Boston. I came to New York for a job, and I began to hang out at Miral Mission. This is a mission organization in New York. They were helping children with mental disabilities, developmental disabilities, autism, that sort of thing. And my wife, Grace, was a volunteer at the time. She was helping out at the after-school program that the mission organization was running. And I went there with a friend. And the first day I went there, the man who was running the mission said, "Oh, this is a great place." And he was giving me a case why I should keep coming back. And one of them he said was, "We have a lot of single women here." And he said, "You can probably find a wife." And I was kind of, all right. And at the time I had a seeing eye dog, so I was traveling with a dog. And dog. Oh man, a dog is wonderful when it comes to interesting women. So these ladies were coming up and they were, asking about the dog, trying to get to know the dog. All these. What I found out though is, that is bad because they're interested in the dog, they're interested in you. But there was one woman who complained about my dog. She was like, "Oh, this dog sheds so much." And I was like, how rude is that? All these other women were very interested in me or the dog, but she was really a big complainer. And as you can guess, she's the one sitting over there. So be careful about complaining about the dog, other people's dogs. Any other question? All right, good. I hope to see some of you. Oh, go ahead, sorry. How do you, oh, good question. So there is such a thing as Braille music. It's essentially, basically code. It's basically codes that they developed. So, of course, because I cannot see, I have to read the Braille music with my fingers and memorize everything. So piano lessons meant really memorizing the pieces and playing. So, I don't think I picked up much musical ability or appreciation for music, but I learned how to memorize things quick. So, those things happen. Yeah, so there's such a thing as a Braille music. And, there are incredible musicians who are blind who do not need score of any kind. They can actually hear a piece of music and they can play. but I wasn't, as I mentioned, musically talented like that. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you. I hope to meet you, I mean many of you, and work with you on Yana projects. There are many things that you as individuals can do, and there are many things that you as a church can do. And for all those opportunities, let's talk more. Thank you.